This session is going to cover converting from the classic or original LegalServer interface to the new LegalServer interface. I get my screen displayed, and we can get started. I've logged into a test site that is using the classic interface. If your site is currently using it, you will certainly recognize that. One of the primary differences we'll see between the classic and the new interface is that the sidebar is a right sidebar in the classic interface, and that is going to become a left sidebar in the new interface. And also, a lot of the links that show up on the right side of the screen in the classic interface will show up in the new Actions menu on the new interface. So let me first show you for reference material that we have on the help pages. I'm going to open up the help page on the site in another browser tab. And the help page is available directly on the site. I would recommend that you use the Go to Community Site link that you'll see over on the right-hand side. The formatting will just be a little bit cleaner, and also some of the screenshots might show up a little bit better coming directly from the community site. On the community site, if you scroll down into the Administration Tools section, you'll see a link for converting to the new interface. And as this page will explain to you, this is going to help you in terms of how to convert over to the new interface and some of the changes that you'll want to make as a site administrator when you do make the conversion. As you can see, there are some required changes, some that are optional, but you probably definitely will want to make. And then also you may want to make other changes to your site that certainly are optional.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
A couple of the things that are covered on the help page is that a common question, there's no cost to switching over to the new interface other than the time for one or more site administrators to make the changes that we're going to talk about here. And also, most organizations will want to convert their demo site first. Typically, then that gives the administrator the chance to make those adjustments under the new interface, not being under the time pressure of having to do it at night or over a weekend or something like that. And also then typically you would want to provide some training to people, show them the new interface, how it's going to work, and so forth, and then make the conversion to the live site. Another thing to note too is that if you do it that way, there's not a way to copy your changes that you've made on your demo site to the interface back over to the live site. So you'll have to redo whatever changes you make on your demo site over on your live site and redo those manually. So what we recommend, and site administrators have told us it's been helpful for them, they just keep a list of the changes that they're making, and then they can fairly quickly go back and make those changes on their live site, whether that's over an evening, over a weekend, or whatever it happens to be. In terms of time to do this, as the page indicates, that's going to vary widely depending on if you're the person doing it, depending on your familiarity with some of the process management tools. So if those are fairly new to you, it's definitely going to take you longer. If you're pretty familiar with those, changing forms, changing the main profile on cases, and that sort of thing, then you should probably expect to spend anywhere from about 2 to 4 hours of uninterrupted time to make these changes. And so you hopefully will be able to get sort of a feel for how long it might take you by watching me go through it here today. Right, so to convert a site, there is a simple setting that you need to switch. This is not available on all sites yet at this point. Hopefully it will be very soon. as the help page will tell you, if this setting that I'm going to show you is not available on your site, you can just send an email to support@legalserver.org, and one of us will throw the switch. If it's on your demo site, we'll do that for you there so that you can then start making your changes. The setting is on the admin page. It's on the site settings page. And it's towards the bottom of the page, and it's the template style link. So this site is currently at LS3, so I'm going to switch it over to news/LS4. And click Continue to save those changes. So now this site will be using the new interface as soon as I refresh any page, or, for example, go back to my home page here. So as you can see now, again, the sidebar is moved over from the right side over to the left side. And also, most every page is now going to have an Actions menu, and that's where a lot of the links that showed up on the right side on the classic interface show up on the now in the new interface. Referring back to the help page, there's a list of the functional changes in the new interface that you'll definitely want to become familiar with, and of course make your staff familiar with as well. The Actions menu replacing taskbar links, I've already mentioned that. We'll see that a little more when we go to look at a case. Also, the active filters on the list are displayed. So if I come back to my home page on the test site, a really common list on most home pages is the current assignments list, so it shows all the cases assigned to the person logged in. And you can see there's been quite a few changes to the filter bar, where in the classic interface you would just see a reset link and then show filters. You would click on the show filters link, and that would expand and show you all the filters. In the new interface, the currently applied filters are shown in the filter bar. So instead of having to click on Show Filters to be able to see what filters are being applied to any given list, you can see those right in the list. The currently applied filters that you see in the bar also have a nice X next to them, and so you can quickly take a filter off by clicking on that X. So I took off the filter for saying only show me open and pending cases, and you can see a couple of closed cases popped up here. Assignment status equals current. If I click that X, then I might see some additional cases show up there. The other icons are going to be the same. Instead of links, text links, they're icons now. But reset is just a little funnel with a red X in it. It works just like the reset link in the classic interface. And instead of a show filters text link, you have a funnel icon which shows you filters for that list. As you can see, the filters are a little more organized in terms of the display. So all of your fields, your categories that you can filter on show up down the left-hand side. If you click on a category, then the filter options in the center change, so you can make a selection. In this example, legal problem code. And then if you do make a selection, you can see the active filters over on the right-hand side will show up. And just like with the classic interface, when you're doing show filters there, you have a filter button you click on to apply those filters. If I go into a case, to the main profile on a case, you can see that there's where a lot of the other differences are going to come up in terms of just the appearance of things. And the sidebar is a big part of that. There are, again, all of your links are going to show up in the classic interface over in the right sidebar, but those are typically you're going to want to move those into the Actions menu on the main profile on your cases. And you also, as the help page will tell you, you're going to want to replace some of these elements and take some of these elements off because they have either an element that replaces it that's going to look better in the sidebar, or some of these you just want to take off and not have them in the sidebar. If I scroll down through the page, then you probably recognize a lot of these elements that used to appear over on the right side. So let's go into process management on the admin page. The admin page, as you'll also see, looks a little bit different than it does in the classic interface. So instead of one flat page with a lot of links, you have the categories on the left, and then you have your links within each category once you click on it. And you also have a search box at the top. So even before you click on a category, you can search for a word like process, and that'll show you the 2 links that have process in their title. And we want to go into processes, forms, and profiles. So what we want to do now is to work with that sidebar and then get things over into the Actions menu. So there's a couple of places that all of those different boxes could appear. They could be directly on the main profile, or they could have been converted and pushed over into the menu boxes, which you can see at the end of the list here. I believe on the test site everything is directly on the main profile. We will find out. And actually on this test site, all the side action elements have been converted over to menu boxes. So as I scroll down into the side action element section, you can see that it's just a single set of menu boxes. So I could go back to the main process management page and go over to that tab for menu boxes and edit those there. And I also have a handy link here to edit that will take me to the same place. So now if I scroll down into the side action element section, you can see that all of the elements that make up the right side and the classic interface are still considered sidebar elements, but as we've seen, they've moved over to the left. Below that, we have the action menu, which is new in the new interface, and also the view menu, which is new in the new interface. So there's quite a bit of adjustment that you potentially could want to make here. But primarily what you want to do is move most of these things into the Actions menu. So I'll just do that without trying to make a lot of other adjustments. So I'm just going to take most of these side action elements and drag those down into the Actions menu. The elements that you have in your sidebar on your site could very well be different than the ones we're showing here on the test site. The print side element I'm going to drag into the view menu. I'll show you what that looks like. And I'll just disable this data error side element. We won't worry about that. Now, as the help page explains, the other thing you're probably going to want to do is to replace the snapshot element with the snapshot new element. So let me close up a tab and go back to the main profile. The snapshot is the element over here on the left-hand side that shows you the client's name, case number, legal problem code, and so forth. So this is the standard snapshot element from the classic interface. So coming back over to our page where we're editing the menu boxes, I want to come down to the bottom of the side element section, click on Add. This will add a new side action element. It's going to add it to the sidebar up here by default. And this happens to be where I want it, so I'm just going to leave it there. And then come in and select the snapshot new element. So the page will refresh, and it will show me that there is one option for the snapshot new element, and that's whether or not to show LSC eligibility. So I'll just check that box. Then I'm going to take the side action snapshot and drag it down into the disabled elements. So again, what I've done is just replace that element at the top, and then all of the other elements that showed up in the sidebar, the classic interface, I've pulled those down into the Actions menu, with the exception of the print side element, and I put that in the View menu. You can put the print in the Actions menu as well. Click on Continue to save those changes. Now flip back over to the case we're looking at. I haven't refreshed the page yet, so it's still showing what it looked like before. You can see there's no Actions menu, there's no View menu up here next to the search. So let me refresh the page, and that should pick up our changes. All right, so you should be able to see now that the sidebar now contains just one element, which is the snapshot new element. Functionally, it's fairly similar to what the snapshot element did before. A couple of changes. You may notice there is a little black triangle next to the client's name and case number, which when you put your mouse over that, that will show you links to the 5 most recent cases you've looked at. You still see disposition. The disposition box changes colors. Depending on the disposition, it's green for an open case, it's yellow for a pending case, and red for a closed case. Case status is still there, and it's a clickable link. Date open is there, it's a clickable link. And then you see the primary advocate on the case right below that. Below that, there's 3 other clickable, expandable sections. The case summary, which shows you the legal problem code, special legal problem code, and so forth. Contact summary shows you the client's home, phone, email, and address, if any. And then the assignment summary that you can expand shows you the assigned office program and the primary advocate again. The other big change we made is we took all of those links that used to appear on the side, and we put those up here in the Actions menu. If I float my mouse cursor over the Actions menu, you can see that we have several different categories over here on the left. Each of these relate to elements that we dragged from side over into and down into the Actions menu. So Actions, for example, and of course all of these links will vary depending on how your site is configured. But you can see add activity, add case note, add staff time, and so forth. So fairly typical links that you're usually seeing on the right side of a case on an Actions tab. The scheduling category on the left, which again relates to the scheduling tab that may be enabled on your site. And then we have some informational elements that, the ones that I mentioned, you're probably ultimately going to want to just disable completely. So like intake and eligibility. So if I click on intake, you can see that's just more of an informational type of thing. So it's really not suited well to be showing up on the Actions menu. So you could drag that from the Actions menu back up into the sidebar or just disable it completely. Same thing for the eligibility element. You can see that it displays that information there. So before we go back to the configuration of the menu boxes, I'll just also point out the Views menu. And these links, again, of course, will vary depending on what's on your site. But you probably on your site, in the classic interface, you have a print tab on the right side, and it's got links to various print profiles that you can click on. So let me flip back over to the configuration page, and this time I'll just go in by clicking on the Menu Boxes tab. And you can see this is the main profile boxes that we edited before. And so here I'll come back down to this intake and the eligibility side elements. So these are the ones that most organizations converting or that started out with the new interface are just disabling these. But you could put those up in the sidebars. They would show up underneath the snapshot if you wanted those. Typically, the information that's displayed by these elements, most organizations are just putting those somewhere else on the main profile. One of the tabs that appears in the main part of the page. And again, if you remember when I floated over the actions menu, we saw the various categories. So the first was, the volunteer attorney box, the frequently used actions box, matters, actions, link boxes, and so forth. So there's a lot you can do there, but just the basics of, getting it to kind of a usable state is to make those changes. The other thing about the actions menu, let me refresh the page here, pick up those changes. The other thing that can be helpful to show people within your organization, as part of training, is the search box that appears in the actions menu. So if you do have a long actions list and you don't want to break that up into multiple categories, then the search box can be handy for people to type in notes. That shows them all of the links that have add a case or have note in the label. Time shows you all the time links and so forth. One of the other things that is a functional difference in the new interface that I forgot to point out is the floating search bar. And so if I scroll down this case, you may notice that, as I get towards the bottom, that the search bar up here, first the breadcrumbs and then the search bar, because it has the search link in it, and also has the actions link in it, floats at the top of the page. So one of the things that people did not like about the classic interface was that when the links were on the right side and they would scroll with the page, so to get to an actions, you would scroll down on the main profile to get to, for example, your document section or something like that. Then your action links would be way up off the top of the page. You would have to scroll back over there to get to your actions links. So if you wanted to, at this point, add a case note or something, you have to scroll up, go over and click on Add a Case Note. Whereas here, you can stay where you are, float your cursor over the Actions menu, go to Actions, Add a Case Note. You can do that directly right there from the spot. You may have to do a required change for quick case copy if your site uses that. There's sort of a long explanation there about why you may have to make that change and so forth. If you do have to make that change, where you will do it is back on the Processes, Forms, and Profiles page. And as the Help page explains, you would go to your Processes list, and you would want to remove the active filter, because in the classic interface, quick case copy is typically an inactive process, even if your site is using it. And so again, you can quickly get rid of the active filter in the new interface by just clicking the X next to it. That will expand your list. And if I click View All, then I can see there is the quick case copy process on this site. And as the Help page explains to you, if you use this feature on your site, then you're going to want to come over and make this process active, and also to take off the option to show the process link in the module static profile. What all of that means is, should this link show up with other intake processes? Because the quick case copy process, or quick client add, if that's what it's called on your site, is an intake process. So do you want this link to show up on your home page, the cases page, with other intake processes? The answer is you don't. So you want to flip that over to no, so that people can't directly from their home page or the cases page click on quick case copy or quick client add. So coming back over to the help page, some of the recommended changes, we've already done the replacing the snapshot with the snapshot new element, and we've already moved the sidebar elements into the actions and the views menus. Again, there's a lot of things that you can play with there, so you can just experiment with those. You probably will want to reconfigure the documents block on cases. And if I come back over to our example case and come down into, this is a fairly standard document setup on the main profile in the classic interface. And as you can see, the display is just not very nice. So things get kind of pushed off and so forth. So the help page explains to you how you would go about reconfiguring that so that it'll display better. So we get into some optional changes that you can make. So configuring the new user stripe elements that are definitely going to be new to you. They don't exist in the classic interface. As the help page indicates, those are configured per user role. These elements up here, the messages, my time, LegalServer staff for your login name, and the logout button. So to work with those, I would, just like you would do in the classic interface, you would go to the user roles permissions. So I'll go to the admin page and put in users. And should have actually put in user, and I'll just put in user role. And so the function of this hasn't changed from the classic interface. So you have your user roles. You click on a user role. That gives you your permissions, internal, external, and so forth. But what is new is the section at the bottom, the viewable user stripe items. So, for example, if you don't use the note drafts, you may not want those to show up. If you don't use the messaging feature in LegalServer, you may not want those to show up. If you don't keep time, you can turn off the My Time. The user options here are what shows up when you float your name over the top of the page. And so if I go back up to the top of the page and put my mouse cursor over your username, you can see that's showing my profile, system preferences, and so forth. And that relates to these options here. So if you don't use grant goals, extra information, and so forth, you may want to turn those off. And then currently we recommend just turning off the My LS and the My Super LS options because those aren't really that functional at this point. So you make your changes there, click on Continue. And then as soon as the page refreshes, you can see that a couple of those elements have disappeared completely. But that, of course, is just for the administrator user role that I changed. So you would definitely want to look at your other user roles and see if there's anything that you want to turn off, turn on over in those as well. There's also a discussion about converting to menu boxes. As we saw on this test site, someone had already converted the side action elements on the main profile over to menu boxes. As the help page explains to you, you may want to use menu boxes if you're also going to look into using profile views, which is another new feature of the new interface. So I scroll back up to the farther up on the help page, there is a section that gives you a really brief explanation of what profile views are. And essentially it's a way to, you can do different things with them, but for example, if you have, you can set up a profile view for, based on legal problem code, for example, and so that, divorce cases or family law cases would have one profile view instead of the main profile. Housing cases could have a different profile view and so forth. So if you set up all these different profile views, then you have the issue in terms of your side elements, your action elements, and so forth. Do you have to change those for each one of those profile views? Whereas if you convert over to menu boxes, then you may be able to, depending on how you want to set things up, you could make one change in the menu boxes, which are used by all of those different profiles. There's also a link on that help page to the profile view page, which gives you, more information about those. The final thing that we haven't talked about in terms of converting over to the new interface, which is a new item, is not a required thing that you have to implement ever, or especially not immediately. So we've gone over sort of the, the basic things in terms of converting a site that you're probably going to want to look at. And now we're getting into some of the additional things like profile views that you may want to consider, but I typically would suggest, you don't try to make too many changes at once. Let people, get the basics done, let people get used to that, and then you can start implementing some of the other things, like the quick bar. So the quick bar is a way to let you create things like time slips, calendar events, any place you happen to be on the site. So let's say that you're over in outreach records looking at outreaches, and you realize that you want to quickly create a time slip. Not a time slip that's related to that outreach necessarily. Could be on a case, could be another type of time slip or whatever. So instead of having to go to the timekeeping page and possibly open that in another tab, go to your link there, enter your time, close that tab, and come back to your outreach, you would be able to do that sort of on top of that page. Let's see if I can demonstrate that on the test site here. Because to use the quick bar, for example, for entering time, you have to have dynamic timekeeping set up. So let's go back into the processes, forms, and profiles and change over to timekeeping. And unfortunately, we don't have any dynamic timekeeping set up on this test site. If we had dynamic timekeeping set up, then we would have processes here like add case time, add non-client time, add outreach time, whatever it happened to be. And for each one of those processes, we would have, in editing those, one of the things that we could set is to show this process on the quick bar. And so if we set that, and you could do that for all of your time slips or just one or two types, whatever it happens to be. And as the screenshot shows you on the help page, then once you have at least one process that's set to show on the quick bar, you would see a little plus sign next to the search menu. And if you floated your mouse cursor over that plus sign, then you would get whatever links, whatever processes you had enabled here. So in the example screenshot, add case time, the dynamic process, and that dynamic process has been set to show up on the quick bar. Also, it looks like there was a calendar event dynamic process for adding a calendar event that had been enabled and shown there. So I don't see any questions posted in the panel. So I think we will go ahead and wrap the session up. I hope people found it helpful in terms of converting over to the new interface. Again, you're definitely going to want to look at the help page and follow along there. And that should show you most of the basics that you need to know.